Well, hi everyone. I'm Steve Podmore. I'm the founder of Transform Global. And in this presentation, I'm going to cover a comprehensive overview of what the business is all about, the vision, how we really do intend to change the world, what's in it for everybody, stakeholders of all kinds, and really a little bit of structure. It is going to be detail, but I'm going to try and get through it in the fastest way and in the clearest way I think I've been able to do this since starting this vision a number of years ago, as some of you know. So before we get into any detail, we know that it's the vision for a new World Bank, but better. Now that's a pretty bold statement, but it's really important that before we cover any detail, we cover some of the risks. So there is a disclaimer here. I invite you to read it, press pause and read it. And from an investor perspective, of course, we do want impact investors, people who really care about the impacts, but we recognize this is not a retail investment. It's designed for sophisticated or high net worth investors only, or relative or relevant funds or institutions or partner organizations. It's important I say this because the numbers I'm going to explain are pretty significant, and hopefully they will make an awful lot of sense to people who are watching, and give you some understanding of how we can raise such a large amount of money to tackle the biggest issues in the world. Well, Transform Global is the name of the organization, and it's designed to be a cross between a multilateral development bank, a traditional merchant bank, and a commercial investment bank. What does all that mean? Well, it's really a better descriptor is perhaps a sustainable innovation and development bank. It's really designed to drive sustainable innovation around the SDGs. You can see the colors of the SDG logo around the outside, and it's designed to do it all over the world, hence calling it a new World Bank, but better. Now, of course, we're not going to push the old World Bank out of its way, or any other multilateral development bank, or probably major investment bank for a number of years, but we do aim to be positively disruptive and collaborative with those existing players. We will work with many of them as a better intermediary. That's the goal anyway. Well, the design is the bank will have a cornerstone fund, and it's designed to be pretty large, a 9 billion sterling listed vehicle. It's designed to list within 2 to 4, possibly as long as 6 years from launch, but still a timely period for institutional investors and sovereign wealth funds who will most likely cornerstone that investment fund. In addition to the bank and the fund, there is a foundation. We call it the Transform Global Trust Foundation. It's still got to be formed formally, and we'll be doing that once we're in the first 2 million of funds, which we're raising right now. Well, what's the foundation? It's designed to have professional management and to provide long-term governance around a mandate that says what Transform Global and the fund can do and what it can't do. The goal is that no individual or organization can be dominant within a few short years. While I'm launching this, of course, we need to have it led, and therefore I will have voting shares initially, although my shares are designed to essentially convert to non-voting shares as the shares and the capability of the foundation increases. Well, it will be funded by 5% of revenue of Transform Global itself, and there will be 15 trustees on a rotating basis, designed to represent all of the entities that normally are excluded, including future generations, NGOs and others representing nature, the game changers that we're here to support, and what we call big impact game changers. We'll explain that in a moment. Obviously myself and the team, and also the investors. So the investors, while they don't have voting shares, they do have a seat at the table, and as do others as well. The idea is this will be transparent. Of course, where there is commercial sensitivity, then it won't be open to the world, but in most cases we will be transparent, and certainly on the social environmental governance we will be especially so. It's truly important, particularly when we're doing something on such a large level. So what's the funding strategy? We'll get into that first of all. Well, the funding strategy for Transform Global is to raise an initial £2 million. Well, and this is called the pre-seed round. Now, I've worked on this for a number of years, and I have a list of around about 60 friends and family and supporters who have contributed financially and otherwise. So it's not that this is a brand new startup, but technically this is going to be the first meaningful round. Now, in addition, what the aim is that £2 million of pre-seed is designed to get the team operational, to simplify the communications and do the work necessary to start to build out the tech. But including that, we believe we're eligible for anywhere from £8 to £15 million of grant money from the UK government or from the European Union potentially. So that first equity will unlock additional concessionary funding, and both of those help us launch the first part. The first part of the bank is actually a media part, and that also enables us to put in place an additional 40 million of equity, the seed round. Now, the aim is to put that seed round in place pretty quickly, within a matter of months of that initial 2 and an 8 or so million pounds. So as you can see, that would bring the total raise to about 50 million pounds at that point. Now, what that 40 million pounds will do is it will enable us to make a couple of capacity building investments, giving us capability to do the next piece. And that also includes putting in place the talent required really to create a bank that is fit for purpose and fit for modern times. There's two parts of this, investment banking and the asset or fund management activity that will manage the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund. Now, that will enable us, that 40-50 million pounds will enable us to do a combined fundraise of 300 million pounds. Now, that would be an additional 90 of equity, but also 210 as a pre-commitment to the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund. Now, that is only paid over when the fund is successfully raised. From that initial 90 of equity, though, in addition to scaling and building talent and scaling the media properties, this will enable us to put on the table around about 10 million pounds of retainers, which placement agents and large mainstream banks can essentially compete for. Now, we do want to have a mix. We want to have dedicated placement agent working on this for us, but also the relationships and the ecosystem and the long-term potential that comes with one or two of the mainstream investment banks of the type listed here. And to be clear, none of these deals are in place as of yet, although we do hope to put them in place pretty soon after we've raised the 2 million of initial equity. So what you can see is that 10 million, but that 10 million is designed to fund about a year's worth of fees for those banks, which is quite considerable, but to raise the 9 billion pounds. So that 9 billion pounds, when it is raised, the 210 million of pre-commitment, that actually converts to the success fee. Now, how can we do this? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just over 2% of the 9.21 billion. So it is in line, just around 2.1% with commercial fees for fundraising, although we're choosing to pay this over the first couple of years, and it will be paid conditional on those entities being part of the ecosystem going forward. So it isn't just about generating a very significant fee. And if they wish to, they will be encouraged to actually contribute some of that fee into the fund to support and invest in the fund. So it's not always going to be a cash fee, although it may be. But that's the principle. That's how we believe we can get the big banks on board to raise from sovereign wealth funds and from mainstream institutional investors, that 9 billion fund. But it's important to say there's characteristics of the fund that make this possible. It isn't a 2 and 20 10-year fund as per venture capital or private equity. It's designed to list. And therefore, those investors who put the initial 210 million as a pre-commitment paid over when the 9 billion is raised, they will get equity in the fund at a much more attractive rate than than other investors. In addition, They've got equity in the bank itself, so through the 90 million. That's why it's a combined raise. So what will the fund, the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, do? Well, the fund is designed initially to be hardwired to make a strategic investment into Transform Global. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a moment, but essentially it's to align all interests. It's to make sure the bank is fully capitalized, because the bank is going to be responsible for managing the fund with its wholly owned subsidiary that we'll cover later. So in addition, so the 9 billion that we see as core capital when the fund launches, the goal is to raise additional money when the fund IPOs, does an initial public offering. And shown here is 5 billion. This could be less, and it could be over a longer period. In the projections you'll see, it shows us raising 2.5 billion and floating in about 6 years, rather than 5 years, 5 billion in additional capital and floating between 2 and 4 years, which we think is possible, and certainly that is the goal, but we want to be a little bit more conservative. So that essentially shows if we achieve the 5 billion, it means 14 billion raised into the fund. But what about the bank? Well, we want to raise more capital for a number of reasons. There's a mezzanine round, a 1.5 billion target, and a 1 billion target in the mezzanine round, and then a 2.5 billion at IPO. And that would bring the capital into Transform Global to £4 billion. That's a large number, but hopefully you'll understand why we need that. And it's a big world, and there's an awful lot to do. So what about value creation? Well, you can see here this it shows £18 billion raised in 3 to 4 years, both into the bank. So as you can see, 4 billion into the bank, and 14 billion into the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, 9 billion at IPO and 5 thereafter, possibly a little less, but that's the goal. So the belief, based on all I know now, is that this has the potential to deliver about 75 billion pounds of value within a 6 to 8 year period, possibly a little longer. That's 75 billion. 25 billion would be in the bank in Transform Global, and 50 billion would be in the fund. Now that's on the assumption that we hit quite a number of targets and the wind goes in the right direction, as they say. So these are not guarantees, but the key, I believe, to actually creating something of substance and of real scale is making sure that we incentivize fairly and intelligently everybody to deliver value, not just financial value. So 8 billion of that 75 billion, just around about 11%, is allocated essentially in what we call restricted impact options, RIO, as opposed to ROI, return on investment, which we'll cover in a moment. So RIOs, the structure is that they are over a period of time, that they vest over a period of time, but they are conditional on impacts being generated as well as financial returns. So what this does, yes, 8 billion is a huge amount of money, but it's a huge amount of money that will be spread over many thousands of people at this point, because this is truly a vision for the world. So that 8 billion, it means that everyone can do very well. I mean, they can be paid fairly and competitively with their salary and base compensation. But in terms of the stock options, those restricted impact options, they can do very well financially, but only if we hit the impacts that we're seeking. So what this means is that all investors would also get, as a result, a healthy return on investment. Now that is and can be pretty substantial, but we think that's fair, and you'll explain and you can judge for yourself. So what is the active impact investment this could catalyze? Well, we know that there's an order of magnitude. There's many trillions that need to be diverted to better address the Sustainable Development Goals, the logos that you can see behind me. And unfortunately, we realize there's real urgency. So Transform Global, I believe, can speed things up. It can scale things up to address those SDGs because of elements that you'll learn about in the plan. If we do that, and if we help the world actually achieve them, we can catalyze hundreds of billions of dollars, pounds, of whatever currency you want to mention. But the goal really is to do that and to generate simply massive positive impact and help make the world a little bit more bearable for many more people in it, and to address the biggest risk and resilience threats that we all face. So let's explain a little bit of the business model itself. Well, Transform Global Media, it's unusual to have a wholly owned marketing and communications agency as part of a bank, but we think it's terrifically important because it's really about setting the agenda and making sure we are able to promote and support all of the entities in our ecosystem and indeed the bank itself. Well, initially, Transform Global Media, it will have two wholly owned subsidiaries. One is called BIGCrowd, and the other is called fundingtheglobalgoals.tv. Well, what we'll do is we'll explain BIGCrowd first of all, and then we'll get into the other one. So the challenge really, as you can see, is we need high impact funding, but there are gaps and there's barriers and bottlenecks of all kinds to address the global goals. So as you can see here, on the one side, we have what we term big impact game changers. Now, they can be for-profit with purpose, they can be not-for-profits, they could be policy ideas, or they could even be campaigns. The common denominator is they've got to have real ambition to address the SDGs at scale and speed, and multiple at the same time. It's got to be joined up thinking. So that's the goal. But those game changers have also something in common. And they could be startups, really bold, innovative, and well thought out startups, or they can be scale ups. And they all have the same problem. They need intelligent and proper and decent funding and support that works for whatever their business model is. The problem is the investor world doesn't always match what those investee organizations need, especially at the early stage. So on the other side of this, though, there's a massive amount of money, essentially impact investors and donors and those who are looking to do good for the world, potentially earning a return or not, or working with governments. There's a massive amount of money, and they are the people who manage those funds or own them. They need investable opportunities that meet their risk profile. Now, unfortunately, there's lots of barriers. There's lots of reasons why these investments don't flow. It's a matching challenge, what I term. The solution, I believe, for this part of what we're doing is harnessing the wisdom, but also the funding and collaborative potential of the big crowd. Essentially, where no one is doing something massive, many people doing something small can add up to something very, very big, although people can do big things at the same time. So using media and technology, it enables us to harness the crowd. And what that enables us to do is to create prizes and awards, really powerful prizes and awards of cash and governance and support that can be either awarded or won by the big impact game changers. Well, that helps get them investment ready and get them credible. And that means those investors can better find them. We can make that match. And that's what we need. We need these early stage capacity building. Some people call it capital formation, or the valley of death, turning the valley of death into the valley of life, which I believe it is. It's a rich ecosystem of innovation, but it just needs the appropriate water and nutrients, or in this, capital and help and support. So when you look at it like this is the biggest opportunity, and the failure to address these funding gaps, it's one of the biggest challenges, and it's the most important challenges I believe the world sees. And this is the same for infrastructure, as tech businesses, as agriculture. Everything to address the SDGs has the same, pretty much the same issue. So how does BIGCrowd work? Well, the model is really having a very massive consumer-led but also commercial marketing program using the power of the crowd and social media, and also amazing content that is created for the game changers. That's the goal, is really to find them and support them. Even if we're not yet fully funded, we're already doing work to do that on something called Clubhouse. But when we're funded, this changes everything. But particularly The model is essentially incorporates a free or a premium subscription. So people can subscribe for free and get amazing content, but they can pay £9.60 a month. And if they pay that, they get access to a lot of exciting things, including the ability to earn on the platform and actively collaborate with those game changers. So we can also raise additional money, government grants and NGO and donor money, but also corporate sponsorship. However, we don't need the latter two. This works just on BIGCrowd subscriptions alone because of an exciting part. So essentially what we do is pool that funding. And when we pool it, every time we have 25,000 subscribers or an equivalent, we're able to provide one prize or reward. Okay, that doesn't sound that exciting until you see the size and the value of the prizes and awards. So the concept for the platform is the game changers can upload their project. They can collaborate with the crowd and with essentially subscribers and experts and judges. And ultimately, the winners get a prize worth £3.6 million or an award. And there's a subtle difference. An award is where we find a deserving project and it's relevant for our strategic direction and where we're operating at a particular time. Or we set a competition. It could be the plastics challenge or the education challenge for East Africa, for example, or for the United Kingdom. It could be anywhere. And so let's talk about the prizes. So the prizes aren't all cash and they're not all up front. They're designed to be 100,000 sterling a month of cash and support for 3 years. Now, by creating those prizes and awards at this level, we're spending 20,000. It's half of the net income for the paying subscribers. So the paying subscribers, they essentially £8 is the net, so £9.60 with VAT. So the net is always £8 wherever in the world. Although we may consider doing lower price subscriptions for certain countries, but that would come with consequences as well of lowering what's called the payment cap. We'll cover that in a little while. But essentially £8 net, half of that net income goes into the prize pool. So £4 times 25,000 subscribers or donors or governments or philanthropic funding to cover one prize. So the prize is 20,000 a month of unrestricted cash. It is 10,000 spent on governance and impact reporting, and £70,000 is spent with an ecosystem of service providers to provide all the help and support, everything from talent to PR and storytelling. Of course, a lot of video production because we want to provide content to the platform and help the subscribers share with other subscribers and promote things that they care for and care about and are passionate about. Of course, funding and introductions, our goal is to get the game changers funded, and the other things that you can see: social media, tech, strategic support, events, offices, accounting potentially, and of course legal support as well. So let's look at this another way. So it's a matching platform. You've got BIGCrowd subscribers, you've got the game changers, and you've got the other members of this purpose-driven ecosystem that are really fully incentivized. Another way of looking at it is, what are all the benefits each of the parties get? Well, from the subscribers, they get the ability to watch and learn amazing content all over the world. They can vote on things they care about and comment and really collaborate. They can share, they can actually earn hard cash on the platform. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a little while. They collaborate, as we said. They can even donate either their own funds or funds that they earn, and they get to play, because this is about gamification. But all the other parties have benefits as well. I'm not going to cover them. You can pause this and read it in your own time. But essentially, the investors and donors, the NGOs and academia, corporations, impact game changers. Those are potential game changers. They're people doing important things, but they're not necessarily what we define as big impact game changers, because we want to keep the quality high, and we want to make sure that the entities that are on the platform are truly systemic, joined up thinking, bold, innovative, and deserving of real support. So not everyone will be. We want to make sure that we are really doing things that move the needle and keeping it really concentrated in terms of the capability. That said, over time, there will be many thousands of game changers on the platform, and we believe tens of millions of subscribers. Well, this shows a real mock-up, so please don't think it's the actual design. This is showing some of the functionality. When the mobile app is built, it will be desktop as well. So you get the idea. You choose the goals that you care about, you look at the projects, you learn about them, you vote for them. But going back to the previous slide, you have to watch, vote and share once a month to be able to earn on this platform. So so this is all to take those big impact game changers, and it's to take from where they are, which is below, to above what Peter Diamandis and others call the line of super credibility. And it's really about getting them fully funded and best positioned for success. Now, remember, this is part of a bank, and it's designed to work alongside a fund and also a media platform, another media platform. So the goal is to do all the due diligence, the crowd and expert-led due diligence, to provide them with some money without taking equity or taking, or needing it to be paid back. It's not debt. It's essentially a grant coming from a collective of individuals or other parties. That's why it's really powerful, because it can go all over the world. So there's a marketing powerhouse that's central to generating the subscriber growth. And as you can see here, there's what we call social network marketing, cause marketing, challenge marketing, and big promotion. It works as a virtual circle. It really self-reinforces, and this is really the power. So the social network marketing, it's something that is incredibly powerful. And it's basically very simple. A small portion of the commissions, of the net revenue, you remember £4 from the £8 net is used to go to the game changers. A further £1 is used to pay the commissions, micro commissions, in a really intelligent way to subscribers for how they collaborate and how they share on the social networks, and directly, and how they tell their friends, and how they contribute to this working, how they promote really important things in the world. We've also got some of the budget that's left over for what we call cause marketing, where we want to support a particular cause, and it could be around refugees and migration, or it could be around education or job creation in tough parts of the world. So we will then promote, and by doing that, we're promoting the subscription at the same time as promoting the cause. A challenge is where we set a particular competition. It could be the plastics challenge, or the innovations for oceans challenge, and where, of course, to get game-changing projects to compete and come and sorry for my squeaky chair, for those game-changing projects to compete and come and put their ideas and how they can tackle these challenges, we've got a market. But by doing that, we show them how they can earn, how they can win the potential prize, get an award, get publicity for what they're doing, and really make advancements. Even if they don't win the prize, they can do amazing. And then, of course, the big promotion. So when we actually award a big impact game changer, a prize or an award, or when they win a prize and they get it, or we make them make an award, part of that money, that £70,000 a month, is going to be spent to promote what they're doing to the world at large. And of course, by doing so, part of the deal is that we would also be promoting BIGCrowd at the same time. So when this all works together, it's incredibly powerful, and it can give really significant revenue. I mean, ultimately, we think tens of millions of subscribers. Now, they will be both free and paying subscribers. So getting an accurate number on how many paying subscribers there will be, not an easy thing, but there's something that helps it along. And that's this particular network structure. Now, this is going to get a little bit complex, so I ask you to bear with me, and hopefully it will become clear. And we're happy to take questions at any time if you wish to know more and understand this. And of course, there'll be a lot of content published as we progress. So this little person here, this is you. whoever you are, and you're a subscriber. Now, in this context, you're going to be a paying subscriber at £9.60 per month. Now, you have to, if you want to earn on this platform, you've got to do three things. You've got to watch content once a month, only 10 or 15 minutes, but it's important that you're able to watch it once a month, and we track whether you will. You vote on that content and you share. That's the minimum, what we call earnings qualification. Now, you can see here, this little person is signified in yellow, and this means they are someone you have sponsored, meaning you sent them a link, or you forwarded a video, or even you took out your credit card from your wallet, and when you're paying for your coffee, you show people what you're doing, and they see the QR code on the back and they subscribe. They then are technically sponsored by you, meaning they are introduced by you. Now, the blue person here is signified they are introduced by other sponsors. Now, other subscribers, or sponsored by other subscribers. Now, in this context, the person above you has yourself below them in this network structure. It's essentially a database. It's a number in a database. It's that simple, but it has a very specific design that's really about maximizing the incentives and the ability to drive revenue, but and also generate really significant impact, and where the incentives are fair and ethical. So that 5 wide limit is really pretty powerful, and it's what we call the jet engine effect. If you imagine a jet engine, what it is, it's like a casing. It's an artificial casing that takes fuel and ignition, and when that fuel is lit, the energy basically creates forward momentum that's propelled because of that jet engine. Now, or because of that casing. Well, in a similar vein, that 5 wide limit means that if I am incentivized, if I am the blue person that you can see there, if I'm incentivized to introduce more subscribers because I care about these issues and I just do it, I don't have to actively sell. I can literally just tell my friends and get them to watch content. And if they want to subscribe, they have to. There's no hard sell involved. So there's something called spillover. So essentially what that means is that subscriber, essentially they spill over when they introduce more subscribers into the next available position in the network, which happens to be below you in this case. So that means you've got one person that you directly introduced and now another all of a sudden who you didn't introduce but is below you. There's also someone signified here in pink. I'll explain what that is in a moment. Another in yellow and another in blue. So those are the 5 wide limit. But this 5 wide limit also goes down what's called 10 levels. So we'll explain in a moment, but essentially what happens with the payments is for all paying subscribers in your network, 5 wide and 10 deep, you get 5 pence per month as long as they are a paying subscriber. So in this scenario, on your level 1, you're now earning the grand sum of 25 pence per month. Okay, this is not big numbers, I understand. But you've only introduced 2 of these directly, and the others have come courtesy of others. So there's also what we call a match bonus. A match bonus is really powerful. And what it basically means is those that you have directly introduced, in addition to that base level commission of 5 pence per month, and 5 pence times 10 levels means 50 pence. If you remember, we said only £1 from that £8 subscription is used for commissions to the network, to the individuals, to the subscribers. So 5p times 10 levels is 50 pence, and a match bonus, meaning you earn the equivalent of what those people you have introduced actually earn. Please bear with me. That means you're going to get whatever they earn. So this theoretically, when you work it through the network, it's a maximum of another 50 pence. So essentially that is £1 that we're paying in commissions to really make this subscriber social, we call it a social network marketing structure, work. So what happens on the next level? So on the next level, if each of those 5 have 5, and bearing in mind, these can be paying or free subscribers. There will be many free subscribers, but there is an incentive to pay. And even the free subscribers can earn a paying subscription over time. And it's really exciting because it means it opens it up for the world. And when people see that they're earning because of they're sharing content and they're doing things, but they're not able to take those earnings, then that gives them an incentive to actually subscribe. And there's other incentives as well. So in designing BIGCrowd, which was at an earlier part of my journey, really from 2014, the end of 2014 to really 2018, and when we realized that the whole thing, the whole vision for Transform Global has been 15 years in the making come October this year. And you could ask, why has it taken so long? And you could argue that, yes, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of detail. It really, the reason ideas do take so long to change the world, obviously, if it would be easy, everyone would be doing it. And sometimes to get things that are holistic and that are really well thought out, it does take time. And to get them launched, of course, takes time as well. But the point is, when I was working on this with a friend and colleague called Phil Colclough, he is part of our team. We were really looking at how do we create the optimum structure where the worst parts of network type marketing are avoided, and we have intelligent ethics. We're doing something that's fair, intelligent. It's not judgmental of others, because there's 200 million people who do network marketing in the world, and many of them are good and great organizations. But what we wanted to do is take the best bits and really get rid of some of the things that some people find a little unseemly with some industry players, by no means all of them. And these critical decisions were pretty important. So we decided that we would just have one network that builds out from the company. And that one network is pretty powerful. It means that it's clear and it's transparent and it's fair, and there's no sort of opaqueness to how this works. It's fair for everyone to look. It does take a little understanding. I will grant that it does, but essentially it's not rocket science. So building out that one network is pretty powerful. And the other part is there's just two ways to subscribe. Now, one of those ways is you can follow an email link from a friend, or the QR code example that I gave earlier, and therefore you are introduced by a third party, by another subscriber. But what if another subscriber doesn't introduce you? What if you see some of our cause marketing or PR or hear me on Clubhouse or whatever? But if that's the case, you are essentially classed as a cause marketing introduction. And therefore, the other decision that we made was that anyone who is not introduced by another subscriber, they are technically going to be introduced by foundations that we're going to allocate earnings and bonuses to. And essentially those 31 positions at the top, so the very top one actually will be our own foundation that will receive monies into that. And then the other 30, they will be other foundations and NGOs and charities that the crowd, the subscribers, actually get to help choose. So essentially what happens is, if you are subscribe in a year or 2 years time, and you come through PR or whatever, not through a direct subscriber, wherever you sit in the network, in that database, you are technically tagged to, or essentially sponsored by, those collective 31 positions. It's really exciting. And what that means is we can earn fortunes, hundreds of millions of pounds over time for charities and aligned foundations. Really powerful. But then the paying subscribers, or the free subscribers, they start on the next level down. And on that level, you would earn 75 so everyone has their own sort of network that builds out below them. So for you, if you have four levels down, that is essentially £39 per month that you would be earning. The level before, as we saw, if I can go back to that, is £7.75. So you're almost paying, with those 155 subscribers, you're almost paying for your subscription at that point. But at the next level, you're in profit. And it goes on like that. And you can see level 5, level 6, level 7, all the way down to 10 levels. Now, bearing in mind, these are paying, I've said it before, but these are paying, and they're also free subscribers. Now, what's interesting about free subscribers is they also are in the network, and they also have paying subscribers below them. So if they subscribe and with their phone or their email account, we can tell them how many subscribers they've got, paying subscribers. Now, if they choose not to pay early on, they do forfeit those match bonuses. So if they introduce people and if they tell people, then they forfeit. They would never earn those match bonuses. They would permanently go to the charities at the top that we're raising money for. We don't want this to be a get-rich-quick scheme, so we are capping the amount of earnings individuals can earn. But a theoretical maximum of 5 by 10 would be 12.2 million subscribers, bearing in mind paying and free. But when you actually look at this, so as I said earlier, if I'm down on the bottom level, those 5 big points or British pence is essentially what people get paid for every level. And how it works, if you're down on that essentially the 11th level or the 10th level below me, you pay or automatically using blockchain type technology. As soon as a new subscriber, a 5 pence micropayment essentially goes to the 10 levels above. And that's how it works. So it's powerful and it's instant. Now, there's 3 promotional incentives that, again, encourage subscribers to participate. Now, one is what we call the match bonus, where we've already explained you earn as much as the people who you've introduced earn. Essentially, you're earning the equivalent to their base commissions as a bonus. So there is a payment cap, but if you are a paying subscriber and you have those match bonuses, it means you can earn more and faster so that you can focus and spend all the time you want to doing things that you care about, especially delivering impact in the world. That's the goal. So we also have some characteristics, meaning for every £1,000 that people earn on the platform, and there is a cap of what they can earn, but for every £1,000 they earn, they have to donate an hour of their time to something important and report on it. And if they don't, we will dock them £100 and spend that with charities or others to essentially do social purpose activity. So there's a lot of really exciting incentives. Now, there is what we call a payment cap rise. If people introduce 10 people in the first 60 days, if they pay or match bonuses, if they, direct sponsors, if they do that, the payment cap rises from £5,000 to £10,000 per month. Now, that's quite a lot of money for some people. So half of what people earn on the platform to this level, they have to give away to projects on the platform. In addition, over and above that payment cap, anything they earn is what they have to give to projects on the platform. So that hard cap, but they can theoretically earn an awful lot more. And that causes marketing spillover because particularly in the early years, we will be spending an awful lot of money on additional marketing to kind of pump prime and get the subscriber sales and marketing activity working. That means the benefits are really significant. So let's look at a couple of examples. So on the first example, you've got just under 3,000 or 4,000 people in your network. That's a couple of £100 a month in commissions, base commissions, plus the match bonus. So it could be 300 or 400 or 500. Now bear in mind, all you've got to do is watch content once a month, vote on it and share. And if you do that, you are qualified to earn on the platform. And that's really powerful because you don't have to do loads and loads and loads to be able to build a decent earning pot over time. You could just be literally watching 15 minutes of content, voting, sharing. Clearly, if you do more, you can earn more and faster, but you don't have to be a sales whiz or convincing your friends and family. And if you actually do spam people, it's one of the criteria that we would actually bump people off the platform. We would give them chances, but if their behavior is not what we feel is fair and relevant, we really will be very strict on how people can engage. So let's take another example. So we prefer steady and slow, actually, rather than people going crazy early on. But of course, if they are able to and they can introduce people without spamming, fantastic. So let's take this other example. So you have just under 100,000 people in the network. That's under £5,000 monthly. But what you're doing is you're essentially earning, between 1 and 10,000 in match bonus, but you're also earning hundreds of thousands of pounds for charities because of the revenue that would have been generated as a result throughout that entire network. Now, of course, you're not directly raising it, but you're kicking something off and participating. So those people are all collectively raising it. But that's why it's powerful. And if the network was full, and this is impossible because it will be free and paying, you can see here 12.2 million people theoretically. That's over £600,000 in potential monthly commissions. But bear in mind, the maximum you can earn is £10,000 a month, of which you've got to give half to projects on the platform. So essentially it's £5,000 a month earning cap, and anything above has to be donated. Now, this is really powerful because we're gamifying, and there will be other prizes and awards for people who are donating the most money, including trips and many incentives to really show, and especially the kind of things where people are wanting to support impact. And then you're essentially raising almost £600 million a year, or collectively your network. So we realize this will take many years to achieve. And of course, on a system where we're only paying £1 out in commissions from £8 of revenue, of course, many people will not earn on the platform as much as their subscription. You know, that is the reality. In fact, the vast majority will not over time. If there were 50 million subscribers, not that many would be earning into the thousands of pounds per month. However, it's really important to say, if that's the case, because we're generating the revenue to create the platform, not just to give the money to the game changers, but we're generating hard revenue that is spent on talent and our technology to build out the features of the platform, including incredible content, then even the 50 millionth paying subscriber, in fact, especially them, they've got to get tons of value. They might not be able to earn, as much as someone who subscribed 3 or 4 years earlier, but they could still do that if they are able to. But the point is, the goal with this model is we deliver value continually that increases exponentially the more subscribers that we have. So it's pretty exciting. I hope you agree. So that's the vision for the Big Crowd. So what about the numbers? So our target projections show over 1,600 prizes and awards, or awards and prizes, as you can see, can be achieved in a 7-year period. Now that's about 30 million paying subscribers achieved over a steady growth period. Now, of course, people can debate whether we can do that or whether we can't do that, but let's just say that we can. And bearing in mind, we've got a bank supporting it that will be raising billions, and especially with the kind of money for the game changers that are on the platform. So that's £4.8 billion in total revenue, half of which is going to go to those game changing projects. That's 480 million that they would earn in cash through those direct awards. It is 240 million that will be spent on governance and impact reporting to make sure they're doing things that are important and ethical. And over 1.68 billion pounds will be spent on organised help and support, on everyone who's providing. Some of that will be internally, but a great deal of that money will be spent externally with the ecosystem. So we're essentially adding value on multiple levels. And because we're funding the ecosystem, we're buying services on behalf of those game changers from the best accountants in the world and media strategy and talent support, and we're helping recruit talent. We're funding the ecosystem. This is so powerful. So they become advocates for what we're doing as well. So that means we're raising many, many billions over time for those big impact game changers. But what about the revenue, the rest of the revenue? Well, that's £600 million in commissions to subscribers and aligned charities. It's 540 million in the talent budget. That's meaning our talent inside BIGCrowd that is working as part of the broader bank and alongside the other parts. So that's a decent talent budget over a period of time. Of course, it starts low, 20 to 30 people, but it increases potentially to thousands of people directly and indirectly employed by BIGCrowd over time. Technology budget is a reasonable 490 million total. And again, this is total over this period. We obviously have a business plan that shows what this is annually, but it's more than enough to make this work. And 440 million that will be spent on additional marketing. That's cause marketing. Some of that comes from the initial equity that we're raising to pump prime, essentially what we're doing, and the subscriber acquisition. But importantly, this alone in the years, admittedly it is in years 5, 6 and 7, it will generate over 360 million in net profit. It makes about a 10% margin at scale. Now, how are we going to fund it? Well, from the initial 40 million, from the initial 2 million in grant funding, we of course will be scoping and doing a lot of the wireframe and a lot of the build, but the build really starts and the beta launch when we have 5 million from the 40, which is allocated to BIGCrowd. When we raise the 90 million A round, 20 million will be allocated to BIGCrowd. And from the 360 B round, 90 million pounds will be allocated to the BIGCrowd model. So that's a total of 115 million pounds invested over really the first 2-3 years. Now, a lot of that is onboarding game changers to make sure they're high quality and we engage with them. And of course, marketing the subscription, first in beta and then the live when we have tested all the technology, which might take the best part of a year to do. But what we have, this is a business alone that very conservatively can be valued at 5 to 10 billion pounds just for BIGCrowd. So what it's doing, and I love this slide, it moves, because I worked out how to do this slide earlier today. It's about, in fact, I'm going to do it once more because I really like it. It's going to move the needle from inadequate action to massive action on addressing the SDGs. Impacts that can move the needle. That's what it's all about. So, and BIGCrowd goes hand in hand with funding the globalgoals.tv. What's that all about? Well, I'm going to tell you. So, funding the globalgoals.tv is all about addressing everything financial to address the Sustainable Development Goals. So when you think about it, it's a mishmash. There are green bonds, infrastructure finance, there's sometimes impact investment is doing important things. Sometimes it needs to be doing it at a much greater scale. There's aid and there's philanthropy. And in that, there's some that's done really well, some not so well. But basically, there's an awful lot of silos and confusion, and lots of the innovation either gets missed or it isn't replicated and it isn't getting to scale. And this is a problem. At a time when there's urgency, we need to get this financial innovation joined up and to scale. So really our solution for this, going alongside BIGCrowd and as part of the bank, is to create what we call a multi-format media platform. So what's that mean? Well, it's a bit like CNBC or Bloomberg, but for everything to do with funding the global goals. So it's really what the design is. You can see it's organized now. It's designed to enable people in a one-stop shop to find information and inspiration on all of the issues to do with funding the SDGs. Media-led system innovation, connecting the dots. That's really what it is at its heart. So think Davos Today meets the Young Turks. So it's a news program, a weekly and then daily news program, really about the current issues that are to do with funding the SDGs and doing it quickly and rapidly, and obviously in time doing it in multi-language in different countries. But of course, we have to start somewhere. Podcasts, Again, maybe not like Joe Rogan, but certainly there will be really great podcasts where we're talking on a regular basis, and not just our own, but we will syndicate and we will point to other material that really is amazing out there. So again, people can come into this portal and find what they need and the inspiration, as well as the bite-sized chunks, because we will help summarize and point to other amazing things. Navigation is everything. Interviews. Now, I think BBC Hard Talk meets Impact Theory. Again, in-depth interviews. And these could be with Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, or it could be with Boris Johnson or President Buhari of Nigeria, or it could be the innovators doing important financial innovation, unlocking and explaining what it is that they're doing. And on the other side, it's the entrepreneurs that need capital in intelligent ways. So we will both, it's not just high-level finance, but it will include policy, it will include fund structuring, the complexities of doing this, and explain it in more detail. But that's not maybe a mass consumer offering, I recognize, but for people who need to know this stuff, and there's a lot, and there's an awful lot of people, young people who want to move into these areas. Their number one career is impact. And if they can do impact and finance and policy, they need to learn about this. And this will be an incredible source. As well as events. The goal with events is to showcase what's already been and talk about some of the content and sometimes critique it, as well as what is coming. We will host our own events, live and hybrid, but we'll also point to others that are around, and sometimes we'll cover them. We'll send journalists and reporters to cover events, and again, to assimilate and to really make it accessible. I mean, you know what it's like. It's difficult to actually navigate the number of things that are happening. So we want to make that really easy, once or twice or several times a week, but really, really quickly, so you can get on with the rest of what you want to do and you can allocate your time most efficiently. So of course, there's going to be a website, a portal essentially. Over time, there will be documentaries that are really both hard-hitting, but also very educational, along with e-learning content. So how are we going to fund this? We're going to fund it exactly the same way as BIGCrowd. A first 115 million that will be put into it over the first 2 or 3 years. Now, over time, the bank will be the main sponsor, but we will have other sponsors that are appropriate and in line with what we're doing, including governments and philanthropic funding that might want to set up local bureaus or regional bureaus, so that we have essentially like a hub and spoke operation all over the world eventually, with different sources of funding, but the cornerstone funding coming from the bank, our equity, and ultimately the revenues that we generate. So that's Transform Global Media. So now what about our investments? Well, I talked about investments early on. Let me just explain a bit more to them. So on the investment side, it's really about where we make minority or majority investments or acquire organizations to give us the capacity building for scale to build this bank. There's an awful lot of people who are in small boutiques and other organizations who really either 100% want to be part of something bigger or want to have investment from a partner that is absolutely fully aligned. So these will be in events and publishing, consulting and deployment, marketing and communications, impact measurement and reporting, transactions and marketing platforms and matching platforms, asset and investment management, impact investment banking, placement agencies, and technology providers. But how much are we going to spend? Well, as I said, from the first 2 million of equity, we're not going to spend anything on those investments. We've got a lot to do to get the grant money in the 40 million. But from the 40 million, the allocation is 10 million. There's potentially 1 or 2 investments. I'm not going to go into the detail of what they are right now, but they are meaningful and relevant to this space that we're in and the people that we need to hire and bring on board. They're also revenue generating and they're very innovative in their own right. Now, but of course, things change, so they may be different, and we will assess this when we are essentially fully operational and the team are in place. But 10 out of the 40 is used for that investment activity. The working capital budget, as you can see, is 30 million. From the 90 million, there's a further 20 million of investments to be made and 70 of working capital. from the 360 million, remember it comes from the fund into the bank to align all interests, 90 million of investments and 270 of working capital. When the billion is raised, that's the mezzanine round, that's 400 million of investments, 200 for additional working capital. And it shows here 400 million of that billion would be used to provide initial investors up to and including the 360 million round and the teams to that point, a partial exit would enable them to take some money off the table, potentially within 3 or 4 or 5 years. And yes, this to some people is a large amount of money. Of course it is. But what we're doing and what we want to do is help manage the risk. And we recognize the other incentives are going to be over the longer term. So this, which could be 6, 7, 8 years or longer. So we want to make sure investors are properly aligned, but also incentivized. And you can see from the 2.5 billion at IPO, 1 billion is allocated to further investment and 1.5 to working capital. So essentially from that total 4 billion, 1.5 billion is allocated to investments. Not only that, a further amount of equity that you'll read about is set aside as stock for acquisitions, so that we have at least built into the model straight away the ability to give some cash and some stock, so people have the ability to have a long-term incentive. And for sure, we won't be paying out crazy amounts for, we won't be overpaying for acquisitions in cash. We might be giving something attractive for stock. And of course, that means it's more attractive for entities to be part of this earlier rather than later. Okay, so now we're going to cover a little bit on the investment banking, and we'll rattle through this pretty quickly. I just want to check my timing because I have my clubhouse room in a little while. So yes, I've got a little bit of time to finish this off. So investment banking operations. So the investment banking, it's advice to the SDG impact ecosystem. The bank is designed to provide transaction or strategic advice. It's designed to have many personnel within it, but it's also designed to be a placement agent in its own right, working in partnership with others potentially, where we're fundraising for other impact funds that can deliver systemic impact and that are well governed. And as part of that, we would be providing marketing support and other things to help them in their agenda, as well as working with them on deal flow and so many other things, or providing follow-on investment. So it's really an attractive proposition for other funds to work with us when this is operational, and the teams will be in place to do it. But also what the banking is designed to do is to raise and co-manage the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund. This is truly exciting. So as I said earlier, it's designed to be a listed vehicle. It won't have a carried return. I'll cover that in a moment. But the fees for the fund are 2% of the assets under management, the net assets. So that would be the 9 billion. So that means the fees for managing the fund are 180 million pounds per year. Now 90 of that, half of that, will go to the umbrella, to the bank, for providing services to the people who are actually managing the fund. Essentially, the bank is doing all the infrastructure, banking type stuff to free up and enable focus from the people who are making the investment decisions. So the bank will have a £90 million budget that will pay for about 265 personnel. It will provide an operational budget of around about £40 million, and it will be essentially the developer of the butterfly basket portfolio structure that we'll cover in a little while. So the functions in the bank, as you might guess, there's leadership, technology, development, which is really about working with the portfolio organizations. In fact, let me go back a sec. So the technology is about the augmented intelligence decision support engine and our CRM engine and everything that's necessary to make an operation like this work. There's a significant budget allocated to that alone. There's the development, which is working with the portfolio organizations. Advisory, as it suggests. Distribution is really about marketing and raising capital for the funds and for the entities that are on the platform or we've invested into. Communications, we'll be running the communication through our own subsidiary, but there will also be people inside the bank dedicated to that. impact. So it's all about the research and understanding, are we delivering the impact that we're seeking? And that will work in conjunction with the foundation, who will provide the environmental and social governance on those issues. Strategy, obviously pretty important for something that we're doing. Are we heading in the right direction? Are we tackling the right issues in the right way? Compliance, obviously, again, very, very important. And operations, facilities, etc., logistics, and everything necessary, desks and phones and computers and all of that that's necessary. So by putting that in the bank, something else occurs. We build up the capability to replicate this fund structure, because that then becomes scalable. So it's designed to catalyze, as you can see, trillions ultimately for intelligent economic recovery and to address the SDGs. But that's in addition to the resource, the 1.5 billion that we would spend on over time, other advisory businesses and media businesses and entities that fit. So this is working alongside all of those parties in the best and most intelligent ways possible. So now the asset stroke fund management. So this is what we call the SDG 360 fund management. This will be a wholly owned subsidiary, but it's important to do this so it's kind of demarks those who make the investment decisions from those who are providing that support service. So the budget will be £90 million per annum. Again, that half of the fees or the 2% of the assets under management. When the additional 5 billion or whatever is raised at an IPO comes in, that fee will rise. So if it's 5, it will go to 230 million a year. So enabling more personnel to handle the larger asset base. And as the asset base build up, assuming they do build up, and we believe they will, then that will be adjusted every 5 years or so in line with the revised net asset or gross asset values. So that's 450 personnel that will be involved directly in the asset management piece, of course supported by the bank and with incentives that are based upon, as we said, restricted impact options. So the people inside funding SDG 360 Game Changer, SDG 360 Fund Management. These are everything from junior associates all the way through. We've used American titles. We may revise that, but it works. It's kind of banking standard, and therefore people are paid competitively, but not over. And certainly at a senior level, the incentives are going to be more swayed to the restricted stock options. But what we have, and the impacts that people generate, obviously we want people to come not just for the money, but because of what this is. Of course, though, they can earn very well. They have to. And I believe it's truly important to be competitive and on outperformance. We should be paying incredibly well, but we should be tying to the impacts as we talked about. So it's designed with what we call dynamic diversity. So there'll be teams that are doing early stage, middle stage, and late stage investing, as you'll see in the portfolio, the butterfly basket portfolio structure in a little while. People doing on-market investing and also direct investing across all of the SDGs. So there's experts there in the structure. Obviously, geographically diverse experience, and also sector knowledge and understanding. So this will build up really over a 5-6 year period. These 715 people or thereabouts in the bank, plus the others, they won't be on board on day one. Therefore, the investment schedule is also designed to invest through third parties initially, and to build capacity pretty quickly, but it can't be done instantly. So now let's talk about the fund. Let's just get into the fund and talk about how that works. Okay, so it's different by design. As we said, it's global. It's designed to be systemic, catalytic, and diverse. So as we talked about, it's a permanent capital vehicle, patient capital capable, designed to list. So it won't list initially. It will just list anywhere from 2 to 4 years, possibly 6 years from launch. It's designed to list, as we said, we took those timeframes. That first 210 million is the pre-commitment that then enables the 9 billion and the cap at launch is 10 billion. So the breakdown of that is pretty simple. 90% of the fund is owned by the people who put the 9 billion up. 3% is owned by the people who put the 210 billion, or the funds that put the 210 million in as a pre-commitment. So they're investing at a discount. And of course, they have equity in the bank as well. A further 3% is the existing stakeholders, including the current friends and family, myself, the teams, as well as the investors up to the 90 million round. They will all have equity as part of that 3%. And a further 4% is restricted impact options. So as you can see, the investors own over 93%, and the balance is tied to impacts generated. Now, that 210, as we said, it becomes a success fee. So, of course, when you take into account the intellectual property of the butterfly basket and what we're doing, the capitalization of 10 billion is reasonable, very reasonable. As we said, it will do off and on market investment. It's designed to have zero carried return. So unlike venture or private equity style funds, there's no 20% of the profits that go to the people who run the fund. Often the senior people and many junior people don't. In this, we're designed to be very fair and equitable in how those restricted impact options, performance options work. Everyone gets them pro rata to their salary, and although there are separate tranches, so there's a founder's tranche, everyone involved in the first 18 months, and then everybody who comes after. So as we said, 2% management fees, strategic equity. So this is really good for sovereign wealth funds, for mainstream institutions, because they get to be essentially supporting a job creation and innovation machine on the most important issues known to man and woman. And this becomes an intelligent intermediary that can help tackle the most important issues all of us are facing. So it gets to work with those other entities, and that would enable us to blend capital. We're not allocating, we're not including that in the business model, but it enables us either to blend on a deal by deal basis, so with guarantees or what's called wrappers or government or a public stimulus of one form or another. That can make the capital go a lot further and be a lot more efficient. But we're not assuming that in with our business plan. It's catalytic. It's designed to catalyze massive impact. Obviously, the focus is real compliance. It's designed to be transparent. It's a bank for the world and a fund for the world. Of course, it won't do everything right. So it's designed to have multiple feedback mechanisms where people can comment and contribute and call us and hold us to account. But we intend to do as much right as we can. And I think it's fair to say nobody is perfect, but the goal here is really to be open and transparent. And that is enabled by this augmented intelligence decision support engine. So feedback can be scrutinized and risen in importance. So that's the goal. And of course, we will hold monthly and weekly town halls. You know, the goal is really to enable the people who want this to work to be part of it. So the strategic investment. So we talked about the cross-shareholding, where the bank is designed, or the fund is designed to make an investment into Transform Global. Well, it's designed to align all interests. So that means the fund investors, they benefit if Transform Global is a success. And because obviously Transform Global benefits if the fund is a success, it makes sense the other way around too. Meaning investors into the fund, it would be really wrong for them not to be aligned with the interests of the bank. And if the bank and BIGCrowd and Funding the Global Goals all succeed, they're incentivized, as we talked earlier, for the fund level success. And it makes sense it's the other way around as well. So that's that. What we'll cover just briefly is the special opportunities allocation. So this is designed to seed complementary funds and platforms, and it will be transaction size of 10 to 40 million. And again, making up to a couple of $100 million a year of transactions within about 5-6 years of launch. That's the goal. And by doing this and working as part of the media and part of the bank, it means complementary funds could raise many, many billions, of which we would help build them or build them out or invest into them either at the partner level. And then the fund may be also able, we have to make sure we have no conflict of interest, but the fund should also, the market-based investing part of the fund, should be able, which is what we'll cover last in a moment or two, should be able to also invest. So we're seeding those new funds and then investing in them. So what's called the general partner and the limited partner level, but this could also be platforms as well. It's designed to be profitable. It's designed to both deliver significant returns into the fund over time, but it's also designed to be very complementary with everything else we're doing. So now I'm going to get onto another really exciting bit, one that's really close to my heart, and it's where we do active impact direct investing. And the butterfly basket portfolio structure, it is truly a breakthrough in portfolio theory. Well, you can see there, it looks like a butterfly. It's essentially looks like an old-fashioned butterfly or old-fashioned bow tie or a butterfly shape. And those two intersecting triangles, on the left-hand side, the multicolored one, it represents the number of investments over time that get smaller. And the blue one represents the size of those investments and the amount of capital, the size and the amount of capital deployed into the fund. So what's that look like in practice? It means a lot of early stage investing, progresses through stages, less deals get more capital. So at the right-hand side of the butterfly basket, a small number of deals, a few deals, large deals get a bulk of the capital. So let's talk about it in a little bit more detail. But first, where does the deal flow come from? Well, obviously BIGCrowd and fundingtheglobalgoals.tv are an incredible source of deal flow. But we've also got marketing and outreach. We'll work with other impact investment funds where often they cannot invest as broadly as we will be able to, or things that need a real, deep capital pockets or deep pockets, infrastructure examples. Universities, partners, the ecosystem, some of the acquisitions, and the foundation NGOs. That's where the deals will come from in a very strategic way. And they'll also come with a mechanism where we are continually looking at that wisdom of intelligent groups, that augmented intelligence. And we'll be doing it here. So essentially the first cycle, so this works every 3 years is the first investment cycle. Then it will be 2 years, so years 4 and 5, and then years 6 and thereafter, it becomes an annual cycle. So what we're basically saying is for the first 3 years, we'll make 120 investments of £1 million sterling, but it's $500,000 of cash and $500,000 of organized help and support. Very similar to the organized help and support provided by BIGCrowd, although these will be internal people fully motivated to make these investments work. But by providing that help and support alongside cash, what it does, it gives us a lot more understanding, the augmented intelligence decision support engine. So the people making the investment decisions have got more to go on. But we're not there just to monitor what they're doing. We're there to partner with them and really help them. Now, of course, some will fail for the right reasons. They'll fail because the technology is carbon positive rather than negative, or, for whatever reason, there will be many that fail. But many will succeed, but on a smaller level. They will show themselves not to be real game changers and really scalable, but they might be meaningful in terms of their impact. And some will get a follow-on round because they show their potential. So roughly a quarter will get a follow-on round of 3 million sterling and $1 million allocated to organized help and support. So what that means is in that every cycle, so over the first 3 years, it will be 450 million of investments in those 2 rounds and 270 that will be spent on that organized help and support. Now, this is powerful. It's really powerful because what it's doing is it's, again, funding and fueling that ecosystem. Bearing in mind, this is alongside the bank that supports them and also alongside BIGCrowd and fundingtheglobalgoals.tv. So it really is powerful. And from those, essentially, a third, so So from those 90 that get 4 million, a third, so 30 will get a follow-on round of 12 million for equity. This is each for equity on terms that can be, they don't have to be onerous terms, because it's all about the portfolio. It's not about the individual deal, especially early on. So those 30 that get 12 million, it then flips, and 12 will get a follow-on round of 30 million, and they can get it as fast as they need it. They don't have to wait years. They don't have to build new relationships with other investors. You know, as soon as they've got proof points and the business plan that warrants the follow-on injection of capital on fair terms, then they can qualify for that investment. Now, just imagine what this can do for management teams coming into a startup, knowing if they perform, if they work together, if they deliver something that really shows true potential, they can be fully funded, whatever that means. So essentially, from those 12 that get 30, 6 get a follow-on 60 million round, 3 of those would get a follow-on 120 million round, and 1 gets a round of 360. Obviously, 360 is a number for me. It signifies it's holistic. You know, it's designed to be a joined-up approach to addressing these SDGs. So that sort of structure is pretty innovative, and essentially you can see here how much each of the rounds get. So 270 every 3 years, or every 2 years, or every 1 year will only have £1 million sterling from us, but they might have £1 million, or they might have other funding from elsewhere, which I'll cover in a moment. So in actual fact, the goal really is to enable co-investors at each stage. So it could be seed or angel investors, or aligned crowd platforms that enable individuals to invest alongside us or the fund. It could be private equity, it could be venture, it could be governments, it could be corporate venturing, which is a massive area. So we have the ability, it becomes like an open innovation pipeline for everybody, and it's pretty powerful. So this is what those investment cycles are. Obviously, they're staggered. You know, you can't invest 1 and 4 and 12 and 30 and 60 and 120 and 360 in 1 year. So we see that this would happen again. It's a variable time frame, but over the first sort of stagger, it's investing over the first 5-6 years, and then but essentially those investments of $1 million are over the first 3 years, and then over the next 2, and then the next 1. So the cycle tightens up over time. So you can see it's called the butterfly basket portfolio structure. It's designed to really create a funnel, a pipeline that is so powerful. It's designed to create an intelligent deal pipeline. Now, what's that look like? So every cycle, we talked about this, we'll do 360 investments of $1 million of cash and support, and they compete for follow-on rounds. They're competing on the dual criteria of financial returns and impacts. Very powerful. Now, of course, what then also happens is this is designed not just to tolerate risk, but to embrace risk, to understand, to take, and to manage risk early on, not to avoid it like so many want to do, not to avoid rolling up the sleeves and building organizations, great companies, which is what we need. This is designed to be fully engaged and to engage the ecosystem, as we said before. But you harvest at the later stages. This is when returns are generated for the fund, because it's the basket. If you have a little bit of equity early on, when you add the multiple stages, you have more effectively than if you were just coming to the party late with other investors participating in that late stage. So what's exciting about this is it stacks innovations on multiple levels. And that means although we don't need crazy level returns for this fund to work, it can generate them. So it's like doing that capacity building that everyone wants to ignore, so we can do the scaling that everyone wants to do. Doing both is quite a strategy. So it's like putting seed and angel with venture capital and with private equity in one structure. That butterfly basket enables it. As we talked about, a sustainable innovation and development and rollout system, hence the Sustainable Innovation Development Bank. So again, it's really about this dynamic and progressive data collection and that drives this augmented intelligence. What we also have, obviously, is a system where we're supporting by the bank and the media properties. So the risk profile. Of course, the risk starts high. Many of these early ones will lose, and that's okay. But risk is reduced quite considerably through these stages. What happens to returns? They're not nothing at the early stage, although we're not allocating significant returns. We don't need them, but they start low and become a lot higher over time. But what happens to impacts is those initial investments are still very impactful, but become massive as you scale these entities with good governance all the way through. And that's also one of the reasons why it's so important to provide that early help and support, because the character, the capability. You're often embedding it in the structure, like a B corporation structure or benefit corporation. So it's not just about money early on, it's about organized help and support. So you're investing in the right people who want to do things in the right way. This is truly important. So conservative returns. And it's just important to say as well that what about the businesses that fail? Well, guess what? If the people show themselves to be competent or decent, then they can get to work with the elsewhere in the portfolio or the ecosystem. And this is really about active talent management, creating high talent density, but also recognizing people have got to be trained, they've got to be learned. So they've got to learn. So it's not about expecting perfection on everyone. It's enabling people to increase their skill base as this scales. So for this to work, 2 to 2.5 times return is more than adequate. Although a 3 to 3.5 times or 2.5 to 3.5 times is what we believe this fund structure can actually do. So what that looks like, you can see here, essentially on those initial rounds, there would be no return allocated, and then it starts at between 1 and 3.2 times at the more conservative side, and 1.4 to 4 times at the more aggressive side. And of course, the investment into the bank and into the special opportunities, that's a slightly different rate of return. But when you put it all together, it's pretty healthy. So that is the butterfly basket portfolio structure. So now let's look at the indirect investing. We're putting it all together now and showing how the indirect investing happens. Now, as I said before, it's not like a private equity and venture capital fund. For those of you who don't know, a venture fund is what's called a drawdown fund or a private equity. So the investors commit to invest, but the investors are called the limited partners, and that could be pension funds, or it could be high net worth individuals or governments in some cases. So those LPs, they commit to invest, but they only pay over the investment quarterly, depending on the GP, the general partner or the manager of the fund, how they draw that capital down, because they know how many investments and they know what their fees are, and they sometimes make a call, a request for more money to make a particular investment. And this is an efficient way because it means that they are not having to manage multiple pools of money to maximize the return. They're focused. Whereas when we're doing something at this scale, it enables us to do those multiple pieces and optimize this overall structure. So basically what we're saying is that £9 billion, it's not a drawdown fund, it's a capital pool, meaning it's all in, and therefore we know we can't invest it all on day one. You can see here that 9 billion is raised on day one, and we're showing here, as I said, just 2.5 billion raised at IPO, and the IPO being 6 years out, not 2 to 4 years, and not 5 billion raised at IPO. But you get the idea. So what this little line at the bottom shows is the amount of impact investments made each year over 10 years. Although this is what's called an evergreen, it's designed to keep going and for indefinitely. It's designed, we're just showing 10 years of performance. So this is the impact investment annually, and this is the running total that you can see. So it shows over about 10 years, just under, I think, £14 billion or £15 billion of impact investments would be made at that scale. Now, if we were just investing that and keeping the cash that we had raised initially on deposit, we would be running out of money just over 8 years in, which isn't a good thing. Now, of course, we can take exits from the portfolio. Now, we don't want to take exits too soon. So we're showing here a little bit of an exit, about 10%, I think, in year 5, some more in year 8, and a slightly larger exit in year 10. And what that would mean is if we did that, and again, you don't need to exit from everything, just the larger entities, either through a sale or onto the markets. So if we did that, that means we're still in cash, but our cash is depleted at the end of that period. However, and if we do that, this is the asset, the gross asset value. So again, the gross asset value is somewhere in the 24 billion pound range at the end of that 10-year period. So that is the value of the impact investments and the value of the added value of the cash. So, but what if we take that cash? The added value of the exits or the entities in the portfolio, and this is using an assumption of 2 times. This is a conservative assumption, 2 times return on the entire portfolio, given what we talked about earlier. Now, but what if we take that money and we invest it through third parties into high impact activity? Well, using quite a conservative 6% internal rate of return, and we can access, because of the fees and the banks that we will be utilizing and the scale of what we're doing, we believe we'll be able to access some of the top impact investors and money managers in the world. So this 6% is pretty conservative. But if we do that, then it means that at the end of that 10-year period, we still have close on 8-9 billion of cash in the bank, and we can continue investing at the scale that we're talking about. Now, if the cash that we have in the bank is lower, we can make less investments, or we can take more exits if they're available, and this system enables us to engineer those exits at the right time. So, but what that means to the gross asset value is, going back a slide, is, it is pretty significant. It means towards the end of that 10-year period, we're just under 30 billion of value in terms of gross asset on the conservative assumptions. Now, this is the moderate assumptions, and this is the target assumptions. And you can see the target assumptions are based on a 3 times return on the portfolio and a 12 times internal rate of return. And this really doesn't take into account the value from BIGCrowd and from the size of the bank and so many other things that contribute into this. So we think even this is conservative, but even if we go back to, say, the more moderate, then essentially we've got about 10-11 billion. We've got a decent asset portfolio and a model that can keep investing and keep making impacts alongside the bank indefinitely. And that is a structure that's designed to appeal to institutional investors, because it means that they can have liquidity, they can have essentially traded shares within a few short years, but they can have an indefinite holding period and the ongoing returns that enables, either through dividend or through or just through increasing the value of the portfolio, which is actually more likely. But we may also pay a dividend, and that will be a decision that is taken further down the line. So I've covered quite a lot of detail, and now I'm going to give a little bit more. Of course, I've talked about how we raised the capital initially, or the stages. We've talked about the media part, Transform Global Media. We've talked about BIGCrowd. We've talked about funding the globalgoals.tv. We've talked about how Transform Global will do both the investments into other activity. It will do our media. It will do our investment banking and our asset management. We've talked about the fund and how it will do the strategic investment back into Transform Global. It will do the special opportunities allocation. It will do the butterfly basket portfolio, the exciting structure to do direct impact investment, and the market-based investing that we talked about, which also can be amazing in terms of the impacts that can be generated delivering it strategically. So there's so many pieces here. So I've given a lot of detail, but I'm going to give a little bit more on the investment opportunity. Now, I'm going to be off screen now because we're going to cover a little bit more dense. The slides are a little bit more dense, so you can hear my voiceover if that's all right. So initially, we're raising £2 million. That's 2 million that we're raising, and that 2 million will be for 10 million shares in Transform Global Limited. Now, that's 10% at the time we raise. Now, in addition, well, you can see here, this is 18 million pre-money and a 20 million post-money value, 20 pence a share. Now, in addition, the investors in the fund, for every share they have, it's 60% of whatever shares they will have fund units. So you can see here, there's 6 million fund units in the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, assuming it is raised as we show it to be. Now, this takes into account those 60 or so friends and family that I already mentioned, and it also takes into account the investor introductions, which we'll cover later on. So essentially there is shares on offer for those who introduce either the 2 million and or the 40 million. So it's both a small cash fee, 3% of whatever's raised, as well as a 4% of the equity that the investors buy will be allocated essentially to those who are raising capital or introducing that capital, which means over time those introducers can do incredibly well just for introducing capital. But it also means the investors can as well. And that's included in that friends and family round. You then see the Transform Global Trust Foundation that will own 20 million shares in the business, and myself. Now, I've spent 15 years of my life on this, and my shares are designed, as you'll see, to dilute down to the low single digits through multiple stages. But it's designed to be fair and commensurate with everything that's been done to this point and going forward. So although a 20 million post-money value might seem high for that first 2 million, we think it's incredibly reasonable, and I believe you'll agree as you see the rest of this presentation. So the goal then is to raise another 40 million, and that 40 million will be for 100 million shares. That's 50% of the business at that time, which means the pre-money is 40, the post-money is 80 million, and that's 40 pence a share. And as we said before, there will be 60 million fund units in the fund. Now you see the price down there has a question mark for it, and that's because until the fund is actually raised, there will be no price on that fund. It's theoretical, and it could never happen, which I need to stress. But if it does, that's what the upside would include, that extra bonus. Now there's two parts of founding team restricted impact options. Now the first part is 100 million shares, and they will be distributed over 9 million of them will be distributed over the first 18 months. So 90 million will be distributed over the first 18 months of when we are funded from the 40 million. So these impact options will be distributed when the 40 million is in and thereafter. And 1 million will be discretionary shares that we can use to incentivize senior members of the management team and advisors. But 10 million will be used as those incentives, and 90 million will be used essentially 5 million per month for 18 months that are pro rata to the share of the salary that people enjoy. So someone who's junior and who starts earlier, or someone who is more senior who starts earlier, would have a greater share than someone who starts further down the line on month 18. But still, people are designed. It's based upon how much they get paid. It's based upon also their standing in the business, and they're not able to actually enjoy the benefits of those shares for 2 years after they are granted them, or they have options on them, and in order for them to actually receive them and monetize them, it could be 5 to 7 to 8 years. So it's a long-term incentive program. Now, that's 100 million shares, a third of the business, and 60 million units in the fund. In addition, there's another set of performance options, and those are on the following 50 months from the point the fund is launched. So when the fund is launched, all of the personnel, including BIGCrowd, including funding the globalgoals.tv, including perhaps some of the acquisitions, there are a further 100 million shares. So essentially 2 million shares a month for 50 months. So we can see this is designed, and again, as a stagger. So people can't receive the benefits for multiple years. But as long as they do 2 years of service, for every month they get some shares thereafter, they're able to receive those benefits further down the line, even if they leave. So it's designed to be fair. It's like building up a pension pot. But of course, it's based upon standing in the organization and impacts generated. So you can see that's 100 million shares. So essentially that means it dilutes everyone. So 25% to them and to the investor with the 40 million and to the other. So essentially the management teams, you can see at 120 pre and 160 post. I mean, these are really theoretical because they are linked to delivering minimum impacts in the business. So these values are really theoretical. But essentially what you can see here is that's 50% of the business at that point that would be in theory owned in the form of options or that are allocated for points in the future by those teams, potentially hundreds or thousands of people at that point. So they are, as we said, tied to minimum value that ensures all investors make a healthy return on investment and achieve target impacts. Then the £90 million. That 90 will be raised, and you can see here a further 100 million shares. That 100 million shares for 20%, so that establishes a pre-money value of 360 million, using a common term number, and 450 post-money, or 90 pence per share. So that's the price at that point, and a further 60 million of options in the fund. So they're all the fund options allocated. You can see there are 300 million essentially allocated at the bottom there in yellow. So when the fund is raised, you can now see at yellow, there is a £1 price per share. So those 300 million of options essentially are worth £300 million at that point. Now, they can't be realized because, of course, similar conditions apply. We've got to float the business, and there will be restrictions. So investors cannot just sell off straight away. It will be over a stagger and over a period of time. But it's designed to be fair and equitable to people. So as we see, that 360 million raised from the fund, the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund, and it's designed to be hardwired, meaning the minute the fund is in the bank, it transfers effectively over to Transform Global as an investment in return for 200 million shares, or at that point, 25% of the equity to the fund. That's 1.08 billion, and it's 1.4 billion post money, or £1.80 a share. Now, in addition, what we're allocating here, and we're allocating it at this point, but these might not be used for, a series until we have IPO'd or at some point after. So we're allocating a further 100 million, or 12.5%, which would be for acquisitions and further performance-based options. So you can see here it's designed to incentivize a lot of people, and in addition to the cash that we use for the acquisitions, it's designed to have currency, essentially share value, that is also based upon increasing the value of the organization. Now, we talked about $1 billion. Well, that $1 billion, as I said, would enable a partial exit. That $1 billion would be raised at 200 million shares, 20% of the business at that time. That's 4 billion pre, 5 post, £5 a share. And you can see here what that 400 million partial exit, what that would equate to. So it means the trust is getting a 10 million payout, and I'm getting a little payout. It's been many years with nothing and less than nothing, and of course 25 million is a large amount of money, but it does enable me to now start to look after the people who've looked after me for a long time, and yes, it's a huge amount of money, I recognize, but it enables me to pay taxes and do some important things. But it also enables all the other investors to do okay, including or do very well, including the fund that would put or individuals who put in the first 2 million, they would be taking out 5 million at that point. But as you could see, they would have shares that have risen in value to 50 million, and you can see all the values there. So then the IPO. So what's the IPO all about? Well, the goal is to raise 2.5 billion, 250 million shares, 20% of the equity. That's a 10 billion pre-money valuation, so before the 2.5 billion is added, and 12.5 billion post-money value. So you can see here that's £10 per share, and obviously that's the start. Well, what we're doing is we're not being crazy in terms of the assumption of the increase in share value. All we're showing is that this can double from essentially £10 to £20 a share in the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years following IPO. So if that does that, you can see here that the investor that put in the first 2 million, they're sitting on shares that are worth 200, so 100 times their money. The IPO shareholders, the investors who put in 2.5 billion, they've made a further 2.5 billion. But bearing in mind, it's also important to say that this would have had 4 billion to build this business, and the relationship with the fund and the media properties. So it is not generating value out of nothing. It's generating value out of incentivizing many, many people and many stakeholders. So the other investors, you can see the £1 billion would be worth 4 billion, so 4 times. The 360 million that the fund would own, they would own that 16%, as you can see at this point in Transform Global. So that would be worth 4 billion alone, assuming we hit these values that the fund would effectively own in Transform Global. You would see also that the investors who put in the 90 million, they would be sitting on a 22 times return, or just over, at 2 billion. So would the people putting in the 40 million, they would have a 50 times return of 2 billion. And those who put in the first 2 million would be sitting on 100 times return, 200 million. Now, of course, there's a lot of caveats. There's an awful lot. You saw the disclaimer at the beginning, and we put that disclaimer at the end of this presentation as well, because it is important to say there are risks. There's an awful lot of moving parts. But with the world where it is, I genuinely believe the new billionaires will be those who actually impact 1 billion people, and they will be able to make good financial returns, great financial returns as well. And it's up to people what they do with the money they make, or the funds. If it's me, yes, if I'm making £1 billion or more out of this, there's only so much I can spend. And I do like, I would like to have, a decent place to live and some freedoms that I've not had for many, many years. But equally, I'd like to do an awful lot of good besides what I do with the company, with the organization, and what we do collectively. So just making wealth isn't a bad thing. These numbers are pretty big though. So, and what we also see is on top of the incentive in Transform Global is the incentives in the fund. And if the fund hits the target value over that period of a 50 billion, it would be £4 per unit. And therefore, the people who've put the original 2 million in, they are also sitting on a further 24 million units in the fund. So it really is kind of about risk management in multiple ways. And we hope that people will do good and make impact investments with any returns that they generate, or deliver philanthropy, as well as looking after their family as well. So I mentioned the disclaimer. Well, there's the disclaimer. I'm going to read it actually. All values shown are based on a multifaceted set of assumptions. While the founder believes these values to be achievable, it's important to note that any investment carries an element of risk. That said, the business plan includes flexibility. It's got multiple ways of risk mitigation, and it aims to deliver acceptable investment returns. And that's in the event that a cutback and smaller version of the vision is achievable. So that may include fewer and smaller rounds of equity being raised, and potentially not even raising the SDG 360 Game Changer Fund. This does work on a cutback basis with BIGCrowd and funding the globalgoals.tv, and really like the bank as a brokerage. So impact investors should take advice, and they should consider if the potential impacts on truly important issues that this business can generate warrant the risks, and those risks could include a longer time frame or smaller financial returns than those illustrated in the target plan, or which in exceptional circumstances, and there is a risk, it could include the total loss of funds. Now, of course, my focus is making this work and making this work in a way that really works for the world. It's really about creating a structure that can benefit many people and incentivize many people. And I think you remember from the original slide, it's about £8 billion that would be available in those restricted impact options if we generate that 75 billion of value and generate the impacts that we're seeking to create. So while many people will be involved with this because of what it can do, we have to recognize people have got to be paid, and some of the best people in the world have got to be paid and see the financial incentive as well. I personally believe this is a better form of capitalism, and it's designed to be capitalism as it should be, not capitalism as it has become. Now, we know that there's a lot of stuff that the world has got to address, and address very, very quickly. And this can help. Now, you could perhaps help as well. Now, you might not be an investor, and that's okay. You could champion what we're doing. You could be an ambassador. You might want to work for us. You might want to help raise the capital by making introductions. And if you do that, we've got some pretty exciting incentives. So however you want to engage, I really appreciate the time that you spent watching this video. I do a room regularly on Clubhouse. In fact, right now, I'm about half an hour late. It's the first time I've ever been more than a couple of minutes late for my room on Clubhouse. But I wanted to finish this video so I could get it to certain people and upload it for others as well to be able to watch.